Hi everybody, it's Miss Cole again with more grammar. In this video, I want to talk about the difference between action verbs and linking verbs, but mostly about what linking verbs are and what they do, because I have found that students struggle with them a lot more than they do with action verbs. A lot more. Besides being categorized as action or linking, verbs can also be categorized as simple verbs or as parts of a verb phrase, helping verbs or main verbs. That's something I've explained in a previous video, so if you aren't already familiar with those concepts, you should watch that video first because this one will use those concepts without explaining them. The link is in the description. If you have already watched that video, well, first of all, welcome back, and I'm glad you decided to return. Or if you understand simple verbs and verb phrases and how they work, let's go ahead and get started. Action verbs show an action performed by the subject. For example, the dog chased a ball. The coat hangs from its hook on the wall. The hinges creak faintly. All of these are simple action verbs. We are playing tennis tomorrow. You have been taking far too long. She should not have thrown that paper away. These sentences all use verb phrases, with an action verb as the main verb. Action verbs are generally easy to spot. However, sometimes students have difficulty with verbs that don't show movement. He has read a poem every day. I really like pie. The students were thinking carefully about their answers. The key to understanding whether or not a verb is an action verb is to understand its counterpart, the linking verb. Linking verbs are sometimes referred to as being verbs, in part because they focus on the nature of the subject, and because the forms of to be are among the most common linking verbs. They can be difficult to identify because they don't always carry a lot of meaning on their own, the way action verbs do. Additionally, in elementary school, students are often taught that a verb is what you do. This was also the tagline for a series of public service advertisements from the CDC promoting physical activity. And while I'm all in favor of health and fitness, it does irk me somewhat that an entire category of verbs was brushed aside as a result. So, linking verbs aren't what you do, and that makes them tougher to pick out. What you have to do is think about the function of the clause. Nothing is happening necessarily, but we're learning more about the subject of the clause. Here are some examples. Ms. Cole is a teacher. My students are diligent. That roll of toilet paper was far too expensive. Your mother must have been a tall woman. Those cookies should be cool enough to eat. The puppies have been mischievous this afternoon. Each of these is a simple sentence, which means it's a single independent clause. We'll get into what a clause is and the different types of clauses in another video. A clause with a linking verb will have a description of the subject in the predicate. The key is that the description isn't the verb. They just let you know what kind of verb you're looking for. Let's look at those examples again. Here, the subject of the sentence is Ms. Cole, and teacher is a predicate nominative, a noun in the predicate that refers to the subject. In the sentence, my students are diligent, the subject is students, and diligent is a predicate adjective, an adjective in the predicate that describes the subject, students. The sentence, that roll of toilet paper was far too expensive, is a little trickier because the subject is actually roll, not toilet paper, because of the prepositional phrase. We'll get to prepositions and prepositional phrases in another video. At any rate, the word expensive is a predicate adjective that describes roll. In the sentence, your mother must have been a tall woman, the subject is mother, and the predicate nominative woman refers to the subject. In this sentence, the subject is cookies, and the predicate adjective that describes them is the word cool. Similarly, here the subject is puppies, and the predicate adjective is mischievous. Becoming familiar with the structure of these sorts of clauses and sentences is the best way to be able to recognize them and use them effectively. It's not enough just to remember the forms of the verb to be for two reasons. First of all, those verb forms can be used as helping verbs in verb phrases with an action verb as the main verb, as I showed in my video on simple verbs and verb phrases. For example, Ms. Cole has been explaining verbs. In this sentence, the verb phrase is has been explaining, with explaining as the action main verb, and has been both used as helping verbs. Second, there are lots of other verbs that can be used as linking verbs. This is why I prefer to call them linking verbs, because they create a link between the subject and the word or phrase that modifies it in the predicate. As I've said before, and as you'll hear me say again, quite frequently. You have to pay attention to how it's used. Sensory words: looks, smells, feels, sounds, tastes. When these are used as verbs, they can either be action verbs or linking verbs. Again, it depends on how they're used. The girl looks carefully. Carefully is an adverb, modifying the verb looks. In this sentence, the girl is performing an action, and so looks is an action verb. The girl looks good. Good is an adjective, and therefore it modifies the noun girl. In this case, the predicate is describing the subject, and so looks is a linking verb. This is why it's important to understand the difference between adjectives and adverbs. If you say, he smells bad, you might mean that he has a cold and his nose is stuffy, and his sense of smell is poor. But because bad is an adjective, the meaning comes across that he's stinky. Linking verbs really aren't all that challenging. They just require you to look at the clause as a whole for meaning, rather than the individual word. And that's an important skill to develop. It will help you become stronger both as a reader and as a writer. That's all for this video. If you have questions or suggestions about either action verbs or linking verbs, or about grammar concepts you'd like to see in an upcoming video, I'd love to hear from you in the comments. Thanks for watching.